couple in their 30s, one child, working class background, nobody in their lives who thinks long term about money. And they're asking a question that millions of people in the UK are genuinely afraid to ask out loud. Is buying a house the only way to not still be working when you're 70? Today, we're going to answer it properly. Welcome back to Money Threads UK. Every week, I find a real post from the UK personal finance subreddit, and we break it all the way down together. Real people, real money, no jargon and no judgment. This week's post is one of the most important questions I've seen on that subreddit in a long time. I'm Charlie, let's get into it. This week's post came from the UK personal finance subreddit and is already generating a huge response. Here's the situation. A couple, she's 33, he's 37. They have a 2-year-old child, both working class, and by their own admission, they don't know anyone in their circle who thinks this far ahead about money. Now, home ownership isn't a huge priority for them personally, but they can see the financial logic of it. Specifically, the idea of getting to retirement without a monthly rent or mortgage payment hanging over them, the security of having nothing owed on a home, the option to downsize if needed. They also mentioned something that really caught my attention. Their aging parents are in council houses and are expecting either them or the state to cover their care costs, which the poster was very clear is not their reality. And they ended with a really honest question. Is buying a house the only way to not be working past the age of 70? Or could they save and invest instead? Maybe even buy a care home flat or a small property outright later in life? Right, let's break this down, because there is a lot going on here and almost all of it is worth talking about. Point 1. The dead money myth. Before we get into the numbers, I want to deal with that phrase that always comes up in any conversation about renting versus buying. Renting is dead money. You've heard it, everyone's heard it. Your parents probably said it, your friends probably say it, and it is, at best, a massive oversimplification. At worst, it's just wrong. Here's why. When you rent, yes, that money goes to a landlord. You don't get it back, you don't build equity. But when you buy, only the capital repayment part of your mortgage actually builds equity. The interest you pay every month, that's also dead money. On a 25-year mortgage, at current rates, the interest alone over the lifetime of the mortgage can easily exceed the original purchase price of the property. And on top of that, you're responsible for every repair, every boiler breakdown, every leaking roof, and every damp wall. So when someone says renting is dead money, what they really mean is buying builds equity over time, which is true and important, but it's not the same thing. Now, having said that, the numbers still tend to favour buying over the long term, quite significantly. Research from the Intermediary Mortgage Lenders Association found that paying a mortgage rather than renting could leave buyers around £350,000 better off over a 30-year period, even if house prices didn't rise at all. £350,000. So, renting isn't dead money, but buying is almost always the better long-term financial decision if you can actually access it. And in 2026, access has genuinely improved. Point 2. The 2026 picture. Here's something that might surprise you. For the first time in years, mortgage payments and rent payments are actually quite close. The average monthly rent across Great Britain is currently around £1,540. The average new mortgage payment is around £1,670. Now, that gap is partly because mortgage rates have climbed sharply over the first few months of 2026, but here's what's actually changed structurally, and this is genuinely significant. Lenders in 2026 have eased their stress testing. If you've tried to get a mortgage in the last few years, you'll know that the lenders weren't just checking whether you could afford the rate you were being offered, they were testing whether you could afford a rate several percent higher than that. At its peak, stress testing was being done at around 8.5%. That locked a lot of people out completely, not because they couldn't afford a mortgage, but because they couldn't pass the affordability test on a rate they'd never actually be paying. In 2026, that stress testing threshold has eased to around 6.5%. That sounds like a small change, but it isn't. It has meaningfully increased borrowing capacity for a huge number of people, without their income having changed at all. Around 40% of UK homes are now cheaper to buy than rent, particularly in northern regions and outside of London. If this couple are outside the southeast, the maths may be working in their favour right now, in a way that it hasn't been for years. Point 3. Is a paid-off house the only route to a comfortable retirement? Now, to the heart of what they're actually asking. Is a paid-off home the only way to retire comfortably? The honest answer is no, but it is the most reliable way for most people. And understanding why that is matters more than just saying yes or no. Let me explain the alternative first. The case for investing instead of buying goes like this. Instead of putting a deposit on a house, you invest that money, and any money you would have spent on mortgage payments above rent into a stocks and shares ISA or a global index fund. Historically, a diversified global index fund has returned somewhere between 6 and 8% annually over the long term. Compounded over 30 years, that money can grow into a genuinely significant sum. In theory, if you invest with enough discipline for long enough, you can accumulate enough wealth to cover your housing costs in retirement, and that is true. Here's the problem. The theory requires perfect discipline. It requires that every month, without fail, you invest the difference between what you're paying in rent and what your mortgage would have been. It requires that you don't dip into that fund when the car needs replacing, or the boiler breaks, or life just gets expensive for a year. It requires that you stay invested through every market downturn, every financial crisis, every moment when everything is going down and the temptation to sell is overwhelming. Very few people maintain that discipline for 30 years without a single slip. The paid off house doesn't require discipline in the same way. It's automatic, structural. Every month, the mortgage gets paid, the equity quietly builds, and 30 years later, the house is yours. No market crashes can take your roof. No volatility can make you homeless. For working class families who may not have a financial safety net, who may not have parents to bail them out, that structural security is worth more than the theoretical upside of investing. Not because the numbers are necessarily better, but because the security is real and the discipline required by the alternative is genuinely very hard to maintain. So, to answer the question directly, buying a house is not the only way to retire comfortably. But for most UK families, it remains the most reliable, most accessible, and most emotionally secure path to get there. If they can buy, they should seriously consider it. Point 4, the aging parents situation. Now, I want to flag something in this post that I think deserves more attention than it usually gets. The poster mentioned that their aging parents are in council houses and are expecting either them or the state to provide care. There's something really important to understand here, not just for this couple, but for anyone watching who is a homeowner or planning to become one. Social care in the UK is means tested. If you own a property and your total assets exceed £23,250, you are generally expected to fund your own care. That includes the value of your home if you're moving into residential care and there's no qualifying dependent still living in it. What this means in practice is if this couple buy a home, pay off the mortgage, and then need residential care later in life, the value of that home could be used to fund their care costs before any state support kicks in. Now, I'm not saying don't buy. The paid off home still makes enormous sense, and there are financial planning strategies, things like property trusts and gifting rules, that some people use to navigate this, but that is absolutely a conversation to have with a qualified financial or legal advisor before making long-term plans. The state will absolutely be there for you. It will just want to check your bank balance first. Point 5. The working class long-term thinking point. Before the verdict, I want to come back to something this couple said that I don't want to just gloss over. They said they're working class and they don't know anyone in their circle who thinks this far ahead about money. I want to say something directly to them and to anyone watching who recognises that situation. The fact that you are asking this question at 33 and 37 with a 2-year-old and a working class background and no financial role models around you puts you so far ahead of most people that is almost impossible to overstate. Most people don't think seriously about retirement until they are close enough to smell it, by which point the options are significantly narrower. The single biggest advantage in personal finance is not income. It's not where you went to school. It's not what your parents had. It's time. And this couple has time. They're using it, and that is everything. So, is buying a house the only way to retire comfortably in the UK? No, but for most working class families, it remains the most reliable path. Not because the alternatives don't work in theory, but because the alternatives require a level of sustained financial discipline that is genuinely very difficult to maintain for 30 years without structural support. The paid off house provides that structure automatically. If this couple can buy, at their ages, with their thinking, they should. And they should start that conversation now, while the lending environment in 2026 is meaningfully more accessible than it has been in years. Here's your one thing to take away from this episode. Whatever your housing situation right now, don't start with the question, can I afford to buy? Start with this one instead. What does my retirement actually look like if I keep doing exactly what I'm doing now? Answer that honestly, then work backwards. Because the couple in this post didn't ask, how do I get on the property ladder? They asked, how do I not be working at 70? That is the right question, and it is never too early or too late to start answering it. I want to hear from you in the comments this week. Rent or buy? Where do you stand in 2026? And has your answer changed in the last few years? Because I think a lot of people's answers have, and I'd love to know where the Money Threads UK community sits on this. Drop it below. I read every single one, and I always reply. If you're new here, this is Money Threads UK. Every week, a real post, an honest breakdown, and something genuinely useful to take away. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one. and drop a like. I'm Charlie. I'll see you next week.